Dyer of Jay's Analysis, and I'm here with Jamie Hanshaw, and we're going to be talking about the hottest growing religion out there, and that's appropriate because we cover cults, mind control, alternative religions, sects, and groups all the time, because those are often used by the power elite to steer us into a new direction. You know, even antinatalism from Extinction Rebellion, the Green Agenda, all those things are kind of bound up with the New Age, with worshiping Gaia. And one of those recent religions, and I say recent because we're going to find out the real history of Wicca and many of the offshoots of goddess worship and whatnot. They're not actually that old. I'm not saying that there weren't ancient witches. There were, but ancient and medieval witchcraft doesn't really have a connection to today's religious movements known as Wicca and the so-called traditional witchcraft movements. What I want to talk about is their real origins and the socio-cultural impacts that they have. If you go and you read about rising religions, religious trends, you'll find out that especially amongst Zoomers and even millennials, the fastest growing religion, supposedly according to the mainstream media, is witchcraft and Wicca. And it's, I think, tied into the decline of patriarchy and the rise of feminism and a society that's geared more and more towards what we might call feminine ideas or equalitarianism. So the loss of the patriarchy or the loss of the father archetype goes along with the loss of order, structure, logos, and the rise of the feminine or the rise of the goddess. And that, I think, is not accidental. I think it's by design. So we're going to get Jamie to give us some insights on the history and the rise of witchcraft.
Well, we're going to do Defense Against the Dark Arts class today.
Okay.
And, well, because we've studied a lot, along with Wicca, we've also studied Rosicrucian, Manly P. Hall, Emerald Tablets, Philosophical Research Society, what else? Hermetics, just all of that.
Yeah, Neoplatonism, alchemy, all that.
Right. Freemasonry, Egyptology, Golden Dawn OTO, and all of these things have roots in the same ideologies, and we are going to show today that the newest trend is going to be witchcore, I think. What do you think?
Well, if you go on TikTok, the hottest videos don't have anything to do with anything based in reality. It's what crystals give you sex energy. So this is what all the people who are 17, 18, 19 are watching, especially women. They're getting into their crystals and getting sex power from crystals. So that's what everybody who's 25 and under is watching on social media.
Yeah. So 10 years ago, I wrote a book about princess programming, and all of that stuff came true. I linked that to androgyny. All that stuff came true. And now we are going to be seeing the rise of your traditional classic witch, along with the aesthetic of ugliness is going to be rolled into that.
Well, that's relevant because the archetype of the witch is the hag, right? And the old hag who's childless, barren, sterile, and there's then the notions of she consumes the children in some way. And those myths, those stories have a basis in reality, because I did an interview with a professor this week on my channel, and we were talking about, he did a history of witchcraft from a biological and sociological perspective. And he was talking about how this is really the predecessor to modern feminism and to abortion, is what witches were doing, in the 15th, 16th century.
And also we are going to link it to the music industry and the fashion industry. And they say that fashion is the witch's greatest friend. And we saw all of that play out with the Balenciaga scandals and the people that were linked to that. So you're going to be seeing more of this come out in fashion: goat's heads, blood, bodily fluids, nasty things, even more.
Well, Target, right, just did a bunch of this, right?
Yes, and we'll get into Target deeply when we get to the end and the point of what we're making in the show. Okay. So it's going to be gore. It's going to be...
What's going to be gore?
The fashion trends.
The coming future. Fashion trends.
Yes. We're predicting coming fashion trends is witchcore, gore, goat's heads, androgyny.
But isn't it already here?
It
is, it's going to get more popular?
But you're going to be seeing it more and more.
Okay.
So right now it's in the high fashion world. It's in elite Hollywood. It's at Met Gala. But now it's at Target.
Now it spills down.
Exactly.
Yeah, right.
It trickles down to Target, and it's going to be in the lower levels of culture very soon. Your little niece is going to be wearing a pointy hat and riding a broomstick for fashion reasons. Right?
Well, and Harry Potter kind of was a big part of making this popular. I mean, I know that was just kind of, young adult fiction, but what I'm saying is that it really opened the gate. And even at that time, I remember reading that a lot of the occult societies and secret societies were actually thanking J.K. Rowling for opening up a lot of people to the possibilities of getting into witchcraft, especially that younger generation.
So do you remember that 1993 Disney movie, Hocus Pocus?
Yes.
And in the original movie, it was the 3 children who defeated the evil witches who were trying to steal their life force, their adrenochrome, their essence.
Yeah, so kind of still in the essence of the young. Yeah.
Yes. And so the sequel came out in 2022, and the entire narrative is kind of skewed in a way because it was very different, where the witch sisters return to the future. They're local heroes now.
Right.
And they're emulated by the townspeople, and all of the townspeople dress up as them and portray them in the talent competition.
Yeah, and the new Hocus Pocus, witchcraft is now normalized.
Right.
And it surprises the witches when they come back, right?
Yes. And the 3 teen girls in Hocus Pocus 2 have to empathize with the witches and carry on their traditions instead of defeating them.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, and of course Disney too had a huge role in the last 20, 30 years of pushing witchcraft too, because a lot of this, you'll notice, is not it comes along with a bunch of other cultural engineering, culture steering, which I think comes out of Tavistock, and a lot of that comes out of Stanford Research, and that's tied to the gender stuff, right? So the idea that there are these mystical transcendent forces that we can tap into and magically become anything we want to become. Magical thinking, that's essentially postmodernism. So the philosophical ideologies of postmodernism are often connected to these new religious movements and the idea of magical thinking.
So since you mentioned Disney, let's look at what the kids are watching, a new show called Pauline. Pauline is a typical teenager struggling to balance school with thoughts about crumbling society and the ongoing climate crisis. Things get more complicated when she becomes pregnant after a one-night stand with a boy named Lucas, who just happens to be Satan. Pauline follows the pair's complicated love story. So this is coming out on Disney Plus for little kids. There's also a cartoon that is an FX show on Disney Plus called Little Demon 2022.
Well, they were putting Crowleyan themes in cartoons, 10 years ago, 15 years ago.
Right.
Like literal Crowley phrases.
So Little Demon is about a girl whose mom got impregnated by Satan and tried to unalive her at birth, but then she saw that the baby was a girl and decided to keep it. And so now Satan is the absentee father trying to get his daughter back. And the mom is a Baphomet character and has tattoos all over her and is very muscular like a man, but with breasts. And there's actually a scene where the mom gets naked and does in cartoon version, does a spell to go to the other side, and she looks exactly like Baphomet.
Well, Baphomet is a image that conjures up a transcendence of biology and gender, right? So it has both genders, because the idea in a lot of the alchemical and Neoplatonic tradition is that there's a higher status that we all kind of fell from. And so there was a point at some primeval stage or some golden era where we were above man and woman. We were something higher, some being that had either both genders or no gender, right? And so falling into genderhood, a lot of the Neoplatonic idea, then put us into this situation where humanity's problems result from being different. And so if we can make everything kind of unique and the same, if we can get rid of everything being unique and make everything kind of homogenized, then we could get rid of all the battles and the warfare and the distinctions that we have, right? Toxic masculinity is what causes, society to go to war. And if we could just make men more feminine and women more masculine, we could all kind of be this equal type of thing, this new creature. of the higher original being, or the original single cell organism, which was not gendered, that was not any kind of distinctive thing. It was something higher that we evolved into, or we fell into, which then caused the differences and the distinctions and the warfare that we experience. And if we could just all be melded back into one big blob, as Huxley says in the perennial philosophy, then we could get rid of war, we could get rid of all the problems that humanity has. And that's really partly what the Baphomet symbolizes. It's a lot of things. It's supposed to be balanced between polar opposites and all that. But one of the reasons that it's hallowed by a lot of these people, a lot of these groups, is because for them it's a symbol for a new age, a new era, a new aeon, the aeon of the crown and conquering child. If you're in certain esoteric occult societies, they think that this new age is one that will surpass Christianity. So you had this old age of the Father, and then Christianity, the age of the Son, and now we'll pass on into some new Luciferian age, which will be the crown and conquering child or something like this. That's where we're going, and the symbol of that aeon or that era is typically something like Baphomet.
Well, not only is it a symbol of male and female, of mundane and spiritual, but also of animal and man conjoined, and that's going to lead to man's merging with technology and transhumanism. Right.
So it's an evolutionary image of ascending from animal to man to whatever the next tech god will be.
Mm-hmm. So let's talk about some of these high-profile witches. Right?
Okay, sure.
Well, everyone knows, I think number one on my list would be Marina Abramovich, and she got famous in 2016 for her spirit cooking. Remember that?
Yes.
And this is why
all the Democrat elite hanging out, and they're all into witchcraft and spirit cooking and the Podestas and all that. Yeah.
Well, this is why even when I would be studying Wicca and witchcraft and stuff like that, I couldn't get into it because of the mediums they use. If you actually want to get down to the nitty gritty and do a spell, you're going to have to be be bodily fluids.
It's a bunch of nasty bodily fluids. It's really gross.
Yeah, it's nasty. It's blood, breast milk, all that stuff. So she is also famous for her Hollywood mock cannibal dinner parties, right? She's good friends with Lady Gaga, Jay-Z, James Franco. One of her early art installments was a picture of her sitting on a pile of bloody cow bones called Balkan Baroque. And have you seen that picture?
No.
So this is what the culture is projected to start accepting disgusting things as art.
Well, that's by design. This was something that the CIA pioneered with the Congress for Cultural Freedom in the Cold War, when they tried to get everybody into abstract art to supposedly combat Cosmism and Soviet art, the realism of Soviet art. So the CIA promoted abstract art, and then it made alliances with the postmodernists. So a lot of postmodern art starts going in this direction of intentionally defying all conventions, defying all notions of taboos and morality. And so it becomes this transgressive thing. And that's where we get the next level of that consciously Luciferian satanic art of people like H.R. Giger and Damien Hirst and the Piss Christ and all this kind of stuff.
So in 2020, Abramovich was hired by Bill Gates to do a video advertisement for HoloLens 2, which was a headset designed for mixed reality, right?
I made a YouTube video. I made a YouTube video on this at the time. I remember that very well.
Well, luckily it was only up for less than a week before it was given 24,000 thumbs down.
It got bombed.
On YouTube, we do not want your gross witchcraft. But then in 2021, they unveiled a art installation piece by her to the victims of the Holocaust in Ukraine called Crystal Wall of Crying, and that was attended by Zelensky and the presidents of Israel and Germany, and which is supposed to be symbologically linked to the Wailing Wall in Jerusalem. So she has got some very
powerful
friends
backers
in high places who are actually students of hers, and she is considered their mentor.
Yeah, I think witchcraft appeals to obviously a lot of the elite women out there, the girl bosses, right? The people who are leaning in, and it's a way for them to network. I remember Hillary famously was attending certain covens and witchcraft meetings. If you remember that yes. Came out. And Alex used to have Larry Nichols on, who was always talking about Hillary's a witch. Hillary goes to witch meeting, she's a witch. That's how Larry Nichols talks. But anyway, he talked about that a long time ago. I think he was a bodyguard or something for the Clintons. But yeah, so witchcraft is, I think, pretty popular amongst the girl boss elites.
Well, not only that, it is popular amongst the pop stars that also exhibit monarch mind control symbols.
Well, yeah, witchcraft.
So they go hand in hand.
Yeah, the covens are good places for pulling for the elite structure. So if you want to go up into society, especially if in the circles of, the pop stars and the Democratic Party and all that, witchcraft and Satanism are actually ways that you kind of go up the rungs of the ladder if you're particularly devious. So I think it's recruiting grounds for higher level serving the system, so to speak.
So one of the premier examples of this is Madonna, who made Kabbalah mainstream.
Yep.
She is famous for blasphemous images and videos and songs, right? She initiated Britney Spears and Christina Aguilera into the Hollywood cult, and she says that her performances are like sermons. And then you've got Katy Perry, who just did a recent, like a couple years ago, series of videos. It had the classic witch on broomstick themes. One of the videos called Cry About It Later. And then just recently, Taylor Swift and her
cult
phenomenon of a concert called Eras, the live performance of her song Willow has fans screaming, "Summon the demons." And the screenshots from her video for a song called Karma, featuring Ice Spice, has her going into the underworld and portraying demonic images with horns and masks and things like that.
Well, they were also claiming that people that went to her concerts had amnesia, that they didn't recall the events. And so maybe there was something else going on.
Right. So, yeah, they couldn't remember anything that happened, only that they had a transcendental experience. And then there was another article about Taylor Swift where a therapist said that over 50% of my female patients that have mental illnesses are also obsessed with Taylor Swift. So some links to think about.
Yeah, the pop stars are really, whether they're witches or not, every one of them individually, they utilize the same principles, right? I think you've talked about, Anton LaVey says that you pull from all of your skills and strategy and techniques that you have as a woman, including intentionally becoming an object of, attraction, right? Like lust. You do this as part of your craft, right? And what's interesting is that the craft of Freemasonry is the basis for today's modern witchcraft, because Wicca comes out of it's not an ancient goddess tradition. It's actually Crowley and Gerald Gardner that are the original founders of modern Wicca. They're the one that gave the Rita, the way the confession of the witches comes from phrases from Crowley. And Gerald Gardner studied under Crowley for many years before he created modern Wicca.
Hence the use of bodily fluids, just like the OTO.
Yeah, so and this is really just a way, I think, to get you to do more and more degrading things to ensure that you can go up in the hierarchy of control. And that's why the elites are all people who are, compromised in a black. Yes, it's Jay Dyer of Jay's Analysis, and I'm here with my wife, Jamie, and we are talking about the rise of witchcraft as the most popular religious trend amongst the young, amongst Zoomers, and we're talking about why that might be, and is this actually just part of social engineering and steering us into a society more amenable to the technocratic order and what the global elite want. I think that's absolutely the case. In fact, modern so-called Wicca is not an ancient religion. It's a retooled, repackaged, recreated thing from Gerald Gardner and Aleister Crowley.
Didn't you say he just liked to smack butts?
Yeah, well, that comes from what he would get the witches naked, skyclad out in the woods and just spank them with switches. So that was what Gerald Gardner was really interested in. It had nothing to do with trying to find some mystical powers. It was just a cult, right?
Yeah.
It's just a way to set up, mind control, fleecing operations with covens, basically.
And witchcraft isn't all lavender herbs and crystals. It's disgusting things, right?
Yeah, I mean, there's this idea that there's a white magic and then there's black magic, and you can do white magic, but no, actually, all magic is really just delusion, it's deception, and it's just putting you into a ridiculous situation to believe in irrational things and be controlled by forces far above you that are highly deceptive and highly manipulative. And I don't just mean the demons. I'm talking about on the human sphere as well. Like a lot of these cults, a lot of these religious groups are actually part and parcel of pushing us into an elite structure, that a control mechanism of the Great Reset and all that. So all of these things actually, for example, any nature worship tradition is absolutely amenable to the Great Reset because it's going to get us into this idea that humanity needs to be depopulated for Mother Earth. We've got to have a global government for Mother Earth, et cetera, et cetera. Even the alien cults, they also do the same thing.
Well, I realize some of my examples might be a little outdated, elder millennial, talking about Madonna and Katy Perry and stuff like that.
What about the younger people?
Yeah, so I have these Gen Z witches. First one is Abigail Breslin, the little girl from Science. You remember her?
Mm-hmm.
So she's all grown up now, and she is a singer with an alter ego named Sophomore, and she describes herself as a very witchy person and comes from a long line of witchy women with psychic medium abilities. There is a up-and-coming TikTok star named Ashniko, who is very open about being a witch on her TikToks. There is a girl called Melanie Martinez, who has also many of the symbols of monarch mind control. She's got the split dyed hair. She's got the alter personalities. On her album called K through 12, her altar goes through a portal with an immortal angel named Lilith. And Lilith is a higher up spirit in witchcraft and Satanism.
Yeah, well, Lilith is associated with child sacrifice and abortion.
Right. So this is the demon from the Talmud, a succubus. This is who's leading Melanie Martinez through the portals.
She's also mentioned in Isaiah. So she's actually in the text of Isaiah, Lilith is.
And she's also mentioned in, I think, Epic of Gilgamesh or Inanna, one of those like Anunnaki tales. They also talk about her. Her album Crybaby is an extraterrestrial looking thing. So we were talking about the Baphomet earlier with the fusion of different species, different genders, different
genetic modification. Yeah.
So she has an extraterrestrial looking altar. And then you have Bella Porch is also another one with the witchcraft symbolism, and Emma Watson, Hermione from Harry Potter.
He for she.
Thanks her coven of witches for supporting her.
Yes, in fact, thanks to Brittany Sellner for pointing out that Emma Watson recently announced that she was initiated into witchcraft, and she has announced that on her, I think her Instagram or something. But we were just talking about this notion of feminism and Luciferianism with Sellner from a more cultural perspective, and Jamie's giving us the breakdown from more of an occult, an esoteric perspective. So you have culture and you have occulture. So we're talking about the occulture today. But yeah, so here you have a younger pop stars as well, also representing this. So it's not just the older generation of the Madonnas and the Britney Spears and the Katy Perrys. It's the new ones as well. And why do you think that they reach a certain level and then they get reached out to join it, or do you think that they go seeking it out? Do you think they're recruited? I guess is what I'm trying to say.
I think they want to fit in with the culture, and that includes what we're talking about.
But I mean, do you think that they're paid to do this, or do you think that they're recruited into it and really initiated into it?
Yes, I think they're really initiated into it and paid to do it. So it's a win in their mind. It's a win-win.
Right.
But these things used to be more hidden even, 10, 20 years ago. You'd have to.
Well, but now you could be openly a witch, openly a Satanist. I mean, for a lot of these groups, abortion is a sacrament, right? So it's celebrated. And
even in what we do in decoding movies and stuff, it used to be more occultic.
Subtle.
Yeah, subtle, exactly. But the more you learn about magic, the more you're going to be convinced that humanity is under a spell in a literal sense, and also that all of magic is inherently sexual in nature.
Well, I mean, humans are primarily, driven by biology, right? I mean, that's our most fundamental component in this. I mean, I believe we have a soul and higher, but I'm saying from the vantage point of this world, right, we are beings with bodies where we have an animalistic component to us. And so to steer and manipulate the biological drives is one of the key means by which the elite, the power elite, control us. And
it's the mode of creation of new souls and people.
Right, but I'm saying that thus they would like to control sexuality for the purpose ultimately of having no humans, right? I mean, whatever works to have less humans. And so these kinds of sex cults and Wicca, witchcraft, and all these things are ultimately kind of being versions of sex cults. These are actually ultimately just to steer sexuality away from reproduction. Mm-hmm. That's it.
So when you're introducing concepts of magic to children, in my opinion, this is not a very good thing to do, because the magic wand, according to them, is a phallus, right? And they have poems about it. They call it the hollow tube that brings the fire from heaven. And so when you've got all these kids running around with wands in their hands, what they're actually doing is being prepped to use.
Well, it's funny because it's supposed to be, everything in these kinds of religions or pagan religion is supposed to be the exaltation and worship of nature. But the irony is that it's not actually about the worship of nature for the production of new life. It's actually about the stunting of new life, right? So these groups are not really about celebrating nature and life. They might say that, but they all celebrate, abortion. They all celebrate things that are detrimental to human life and civilization.
Right. So the wand, the phallus, is not being used to create new life. Like you said, it's being used to force their will onto reality.
Yeah, to redirect the sexual impulse into you imposing your will on society and not to have children.
Right. And so their dictum is love under will, and your will is what you're supposed to be seeking.
Your will is law. There's not a law that you submit to. Your will is the law.
And also to get in touch with your holy guardian angel. And I don't have a picture of him, but in our live talks and like what we're going to be doing in LA, if you come to that, your mind is going to be blown like the Tim and Eric meme.
Okay.
Even more so than it is today. But these guardian angels look exactly like the demons from Childhood's End that they're trying to get in touch with.
Okay, so Arthur C. Clarke, who's in the circles of the Crowleyan occultists and the Luciferians, like when he draws the Sentinel, and that's connected to Childhood's End, and that's connected to 2001, right? It has this Carolyn is this demonic-looking figure, and it demands a sacrifice of the children, right? So the idea is that you give us your firstborn, right? And that's, again, tying back into that notion of abortion as a giant sacrifice, right? Mm-hmm. To the power elite, so that the power elite can supposedly evolve us into the next phase of human evolution, this new aeon, right? They really do see it as a cycle of human sacrifice. And the idea is that, but nature itself is a cycle of human sacrifice and death, predator, prey. So they're saying that we're the priests of evolution is what they're saying by that. Of Jay's Analysis, and I'm here with Jamie, and we're talking about the rise of witchcraft. And one of our good friends wrote a good book called Occult Feminism, and she talks about the secret history of women's liberation actually having its predecessor in witchcraft. Witchcraft really paved the way, you could say, for a lot of the revolutionary ideas of feminism and radical egalitarianism, and that also goes back to the French Revolution. If you're familiar with the excellent book by James Billington, he's not any kind of conspiracy theorist. He's actually a historian. He was a Librarian of Congress scholar who was writing about the trek of revolutionary philosophy and thought. And he notes that a lot of the revolutionaries, time of the French Revolution, Mary Wollstonecraft famously, right? They were early pioneer feminists. And so feminism really has its roots in not just witchcraft, but also French Revolution. And that's why it was so important for them to push the notion that everything is equal, everything is the same, and we have to war against all of the inequalities, all the distinctions, and all the differences, because it becomes a power dynamic. It's a oppressor-oppressed dynamic. This is where we get this idea that everybody who has any advantage or has any gifts or has any talents or skills or abilities is somehow privileged and therefore bad and therefore an oppressor. And so, I recommend getting Rachel Wilson's book, Occult Feminism. It's really good on this. I would say that Jamie and I too, we've also been critiquing and calling this out for a long time. And I know that if you come to our LA event, like Jamie was saying, you're gonna see a really good critique of this stuff when Jamie does her presentation on Hollywood and mind control and AI, and how Hollywood's really been prepping us for this, initiating us on a mass scale in terms of, you know, what most people watch movies. They don't watch the news. They don't watch it. They watch, people are taught and indoctrinated by stories, by film. And so there's this notion that if we can make everyone equal, if make everyone the same, if we can homogenize everyone and everything, then we'll have this peaceful future order. And it's all just ridiculous dystopianism. Utopianism is actually used as a strategy and a technique to re-engineer society. So it's a tool. It's not really about giving you a coon pod, giving you equality, giving you the UBI. It's all baloney. And likewise, the idea of feminism and you being empowered and a girl boss and leaning in, all that's going to give you is you being alone when you're 50 or 60, and you being put into the euthanasia center's, sleep pod, right? That's what that's going to get you, because you don't have children, you don't have offspring, you don't have a legacy, you don't have any of those things that the lies of feminism and radical individualism and postmodernism and magical thinking, you can identify as a whatever you want. These are all destructive. And as Rachel notes, you couldn't have today's trends and all this kind of stuff if you had not previously had feminism. Feminism prepared the way for the Skittles rainbow revolution. That prepared the way for the trans revolution. And that's all going to prepare the way for the next phase, which will be the transhumanist revolution.
Well, the Skittles agenda and witchcraft kind of merged together perfectly in the recent Target scandal, where they had those clothes for children that said Satan loves pronouns, and the creator of those designs posted their Instagram wearing horns and looking like Baphomet.
Well, we've been talking about this for ages. You wrote in your book, right? I wrote in my book, my stuff came out almost 10 years ago, right? That this was really an intentional social engineering and occult project. And people say, oh, that's crazy. You think that there's Satanists that are involved in pop culture, and you're a nutball, you're a tinfoil hat. No, we've been absolutely vindicated. Now they've, it's hidden in your face, right? So, and anybody saying, I'm sorry, you were right. No, so you're a bigot, right? So it was bad, or it didn't exist when you talked about it, and that it would be eventually in the public purview. Now that it's in the public purview, well, it's not that bad, and you're a bigot for not liking it, right? So what's the next phase? Well, it's going to be like the state religion of some kind, right? If you don't believe in, the whatever new age world religion's coming, right? You're the bad person, you're the bigot, you got to go.
And we have seen all of these corporations pledge their allegiance to the rainbow flag. And have you ever wondered why Target is at the forefront of these things each time?
Yeah, Target is one of these absolutely tip of the spear, pioneering Luciferian companies. Absolutely.
Decoding corporate logos is a part of this education that you need to have. And the circumpunct, which is the logo of Target, is a very deep esoteric symbol going back to Pythagoras, Plato,
the sun symbol. It's the monad. Yeah.
It's a symbol of the Illuminati. It's an alchemical symbol of fire. It is the point in the circle, which is a hermaphroditic symbol. So even Dan Brown, you remember him? Mm-hmm. He wrote a whole book. He called it the lost symbol, and at the end of the book, it reveals it's the point within the circle, the Target logo. So all of these corporations that have pledged their allegiance to the Skittles agenda are also influenced by occultism. Witchcraft, Freemasonry is a huge one. Rosicrucian. Almost every corporate logo that you see that is prevalent, is that a word? Prevalent. is can be traced back to some kind of occult symbol.
Well, I think part of that is just basic geometry. I don't think it's all intentionally occult symbols. Mm-hmm. I do think some of these corporations are probably doing that. But even the realm of the quote occult, a lot of this symbology just comes from basic universal geometric forms. Mm-hmm. So it's not always intentionally quote occultic. I mean, when Plato was doing, geometric Platonic solid analysis, it wasn't because he had some sort of intentionally satanic view. He just thought that that's how reality was structured because he got this from an older tradition. So Certain companies, though, I think you're absolutely right, are absolutely more on board with being self-consciously satanic, and we see that with the choices that they have in advertising. And it's amazing to me because I talked about corporations being and pushing this agenda 15 years ago, and people would say, "Oh, what are you, a communist? You don't believe in libertarian principles of freedom of speech and companies do whatever they want?" And I was like, no, I'm telling you on a moral basis that these companies, these corporations, the Fortune 500, the Fortune 100 are objectively signed onto an evil agenda. They're part of the Bilderberg Group. They're part of the, CFR, Trilateral Commission, Global Order. And, people were still divided, 10, 15 years ago into this dialectic between, well, it's the Democrats, it's the Republicans, it's the libertarians and the Ayn Rand people versus the socialists. And no, all of those are controlled mechanisms. And until you can see that, you're really not going to get anywhere. You're not going to make any progress. So there's a higher level game being played, and the religious spheres of these cults and these groups and the groundswell of these movements. If you read about Tavistock, then you know that it's pushed from a social engineering perspective on purpose, and they do it with full knowledge of what they're doing. So it's not like there's a secret wizard somewhere that's running the New World Order. It's social engineers and technocrats who push things because of the effectiveness of what's pushed. It's not really about the truth or falsity of the systems. So Tavistock will push these things. Stanford Research will push these things. Look at Changing Images of Man, because they're amenable to the end goal of technocracy. It's not whether witchcraft is true or false. It's not whether they really believe in Roman Catholicism and Pope Francis. It's whether the agenda that's being pushed with Francis, for example, in the Muslim, Jewish, Christian Faith Center, this new monotheistic, quote, faith center that they push in Abu Dhabi, it's whether that fits into the ultimate agenda of what the ultimate power elite, technocrat, Royal Society people have written about and talked about for so long. That's what it's really about. So witchcraft, Wicca, this kind of stuff, that promotes and is usually associated with feminism, which is about the destruction of the family, and the promotion of abortion, which is about the reduction of human population. It's that simple. So you're caught up in, and especially if you're young, you're not sophisticated enough to understand that these are movements that are used for much bigger purposes than your, feelies and your empowerment. It's nothing to do with your empowerment. It's about controlling you. What do you think?
Yeah, I just feel sorry for all the people that are going to be caught up in this witchcraft craze and aesthetic, for all of the reasons or why they would do it, but because they feel disempowered, I think, and they don't know where to turn.
Well, and we've had, decades of breakdown, right? If you look at the Jaffe memo, the 1967-68 Jaffe memo from Rockefeller Foundation and Planned Parenthood, it talks about the promotion of all these alternative ideas, alternative systems, alternative living on purpose from the top down. That was written right in the midst of the 60s countercultural revolution. It's saying that all of the Planned Parenthoods, all of the Population Council, all of that should be pushing all of these ideas. Right, all of these alternative lifestyles and alternative movements, including the Skittles agenda, including forced abortions, including all of that, should be pushed to reduce the population and to break up families. That's what this is about. It's robbing you, stealing. The devil comes to steal, kill, and destroy. It's not to empower you. It's lying and saying that you're going to be empowered.